Hello, gentle viewers. If you've been keeping up with this channel for a little while, you know that I've been trying to set my Saturdays aside to review episodes of animated television series featuring superheroes. For quite some time, I've been reviewing episodes of Batman the Animated Series and Young Justice. But I eventually decided to drop Young Justice, and so ever since doing so, I decided that I would replace the Young Justice reviews with reviews of the Legion of Superheroes animated series that lasted from 2006 to 2008. Now, I should confess, I remember seeing promo art for this series before it started, and I was not happy. At the time, the gigantic DC animated universe had still been going strong for something like 15 years, and if I was going to have a Legion of Superheroes series, I wanted it to be a spin-off from Justice League Unlimited, featuring adult superheroes in the 31st century, with Supergirl as our POV character, since the last time we had seen the Legion of Superheroes was in Justice League Unlimited, and Supergirl was left in the 31st century to join their ranks. Now, that is not what this show is, and after some considerable distance from the ending of Justice League Unlimited and the end of the DC animated universe overall, I am okay with this show being what it is. And what is this show then, if not an extension of the DC animated universe? Well, it's basically the classic Legion of Superheroes idea. The Legion is a team of teenage superheroes in the 31st century, and they take Superboy into their ranks and have lots of fun adventures. Lots of possibilities for neat stories here, methinks. But how does this episode hold up specifically? Well, we start with some kind of battle in the 31st century. Then we jump to Smallville. Clark is about to go be a copy boy in Metropolis. I'm not sure if it is said specifically that he would be working for the Daily Planet, or if he would eventually go to work there later on in life, and right now he was going to work for the Daily Star or something like that. I also wasn't sure if Clark has already been through college, or if he is going to go to college in Metropolis while being a copy boy. He seems to still be living with his mom, but that isn't really an indication, since many students, like myself, live at home with their parents while in college. But anyway, a few members of the Legion of Superheroes come back to this point in Clark's life, and they tell him that they need him. And I should go ahead and say that apparently at this point, Clark has never even considered the possibility of becoming a superhero, even though he's had his powers for a little while, it seems. In fact, the Legionnaires call him Superman. They call him Superman because DC was in the midst of some lawsuits concerning the character and the name of Superboy. That explains why they call him Superman when he hasn't even gone to college yet, or at least it doesn't seem like he's gone to college. But then, why did Brainy choose to go to this point in time for help? It isn't really explained, so I guess we just kind of have to ignore this and just enjoy the show and go with it. Time travel is a sticky wicket in Legion lore. It is used when convenient and ignored when convenient. The Legion used time travel to find Superman because they need his help in defeating the Fatal Five. But why not use time travel to go back to just before the Fatal Five escape from prison and stop the prison break before it even happens? Or go back in time and call in all the reinforcements you possibly can a day earlier, and then Colossal Boy and Cosmic Boy can be there to help out just as the Fatal Five gets there to take names and chew bubblegum. Basically, time travel is a concept that can't really be fully explored in the span of a 22-minute episode, and so it's better to just accept that the Legion came back in time and asked Superman for help, and that's that. Anyway, we get some really fantastic interplay between a few of the characters here. Lightning Lad is portrayed in a way that is really hard to explain. It's pretty easy to tell that he feels threatened by the idea that Superman, who all the ladies are about to go crazy over, will be coming here to rub shoulders with him. And when Superman looks more like a Superboy, Lightning Lad is nothing less than a jerk. And this makes Superman go run off and find out that he has his very own Superman museum. Lightning Lad is very clearly torn between being a huge fan of Superman growing up and also being very disappointed that Superman isn't all that he was cracked up to be. I can just imagine that every member of the Legion grew up hearing legends about this guy, and Lightning Lad is just the most vocal about how disappointed he is that this is what they got instead. Now, he doesn't really have an excuse to be such a jerk, but I think this is somewhat understandable when you consider his character. He thinks of himself as the top dog, and he is afraid that he's about to be replaced when this living legend is going to come join their team, however briefly, and so he is trying to show that he is the rooster of this henhouse. This is all very subtle in the way that it is done, at least in my humble opinion. Anyway, Superman runs off to find out that he has his very own Superman museum. This is where we get some very cool references. One of the portraits on the wall shows Superman breaking out of chains, and that is reminiscent of some classic cover that I cannot remember the number of. Also, in the background we see that Booster Gold is the janitor cleaning the floor. Anyway, Saturn Girl tells Superman that it was a mistake to bring him here, and that they can take him back before the Fatal Five even arrive. Conveniently, she explains to him who the Fatal Five are. Now, if we didn't have this color-coded for our convenience purple energy waves coming from her every time she used her telepathy, I would suggest that she was using her powers to make Superman think that he should stay in the future long enough to help fight the Fatal Five. But as is, I think that'd maybe be a little too unethical of a thing for one of the protagonists of this cartoon to do. And since we didn't see the purple energy waves that indicate her power, I think it's safe to believe that Superman decides to stay and fight all on his own with no help from her. So then the Fatal Five attack, and the Legion all line up, and then Superman runs away. No, Superman is not a coward, he is just going back to get his costume. I am not entirely sure why he thought he needed the costume now, since nobody in the 31st century is going to ruin his secret identity or anything like that. But he goes and gets it off the mannequin in the museum, and it is a little too big for him. And then it does one of those Back to the Future 2 things where it adjusts to fit him. And then he sort of flies toward the danger, and then he helps the Legion trounce the Fatal Five. Now, I gotta be honest, this whole sequence is a little silly. Why did the Legion have so much trouble beating the Fatal Five, and then when Superman gets there, suddenly they are all champions? It's not like Superman is doing much more than, say, Triplicate Girl, really. Anyway, the Fatal Five is defeated, but then they escape. Now, I haven't watched past maybe the first 3 episodes of this series, but I certainly hope that these guys come back soon, because they don't really strike me as the villains who will bide their time and wait for the right time to strike. Anyway, the Legion then realizes that it's time to take Superman back home, but he has a neat idea. Brainiac 5 mentioned that he could take Superman back to the exact moment where he left, and it would be like he never even left in the first place. Superman thinks, well, if that's the case, then I can stay here as long as I want and just hang out in the future where everyone loves me. And who can blame him? It'd be very tempting to stay and hang out and have lots of cool adventures in the 31st century. But here's something I've always had an issue with, ever since I first found out about the Legion of Superheroes. If Clark is, let's say, 18 years old in this episode, and then he stays with the Legion for the duration of this series, which is 2 seasons, then that raises an interesting question. First of all, I guess we just have to assume that this series is more or less happening in real time. So it's 2 years for them, 2 years for us. So Clark would age 2 years relative to him, but then go back to just seconds after he left Smallville. And then the idea is he wouldn't miss any of his life. But it'd still be a pretty big deal, right? He'd be a 20-year-old going back to when he was supposed to be an 18-year-old. Now I guess I'm making an assumption that this series happens in real time. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe a year for us and a season for the show is only like 2 months for these characters. That's possible, and I guess we just have to wait and see. But it's something that's always bothered me, that Superboy would definitely be aging even though he would just be returned right back to home from whence he came. Overall, I would say this episode is pretty standard. It's not bad, but it really suffers, I think, in that it has to set up the overall premise of the series. I'm not sure if any people were whining about there not being a legion of characters in this show, but I am okay with the size of this team that we get here. I don't really think you could include every member of the Legion in a main role, because that'd be absurd, all the screen time that you'd have to give to them. As is, I know very little about many of the characters here besides their powers. I think with future episodes, this series will really begin to find its feet and be even better than this episode. And I reiterate, this episode wasn't bad per se, but I do think it is capable of being better, knowing what I know about what will come. So that's that. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and if you missed the reviews of Young Justice, I am sorry, and I hope that the reviews of the Legion of Superheroes will tide you over. And I hope you can continue to enjoy the reviews of Batman the Animated Series. And also be sure to keep up with this channel throughout the rest of the week as I do other kinds of videos. I'll see you then.